There is a moment in this video that has been quietly circulating online, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Donald Trump gets on the phone with the Artemis 2 crew, some of the most accomplished human beings on the planet, people who are literally orbiting the moon. And what follows is one of the most uncomfortable stretches of silence you will ever witness in a presidential exchange. Not a few seconds, not a polite pause. We are talking about nearly a full minute of dead air. These astronauts, people trained to communicate clearly under pressure in the most extreme environment imaginable, had nothing to say back. And here is the question that nobody seems to be asking loudly enough. Why? What does it mean when the people representing humanity at its absolute highest level go completely silent after speaking with the leader of the free world? Because I promise you, it was not an accident, it was not a technical glitch, and it was not shyness. This moment tells you everything about where America is right now, and we are going to break all of it down today. Stay with me, because this story goes much deeper than an awkward phone call.
So proud to be a part of this program.
Well, I have to say I spoke to a very special person, Wayne Gretzky, who I think you know, the great one. And I spoke to your prime minister and many other friends I have in Canada. They are so proud of you. And you have a lot of courage. I'm not sure if they'd want to do that. I'm not even sure if the great one would want to do that, to be honest with you. But you have a lot of courage doing what you're doing, a lot of bravery and a lot of genius. But they're very, very proud of you.
Let us be precise about what happened, because the details matter more than people are giving them credit for. Trump gets on the line with the Artemis 2 crew, and instead of rising to the occasion, instead of offering something meaningful to people doing something genuinely historic, he starts talking about Wayne Gretzky, the great one, hockey, Canada. He pivots to telling Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen that he spoke to his prime minister and that everyone up in Canada is just so proud of him. That is what he offered. That is the presidential moment he brought to one of the most significant space missions in a generation. Now think about the layers of absurdity there. This is the same Donald Trump who has spent years publicly attacking Canada, mocking its prime minister, threatening its economy with tariffs, and treating one of America's closest allies like a geopolitical punching bag. And then, on a live call watched by millions, he casually drops Mark Carney's name like they are old friends. Like the last few years of hostility simply did not happen. The audacity of that move is genuinely breathtaking. Canada has been boycotting American goods. The relationship between these two countries is at one of its lowest points in modern history, and Trump apparently thought this was the right moment to play diplomat through a hockey reference. The astronauts heard all of it, and they said nothing.
Just brutal. That's almost a full minute of silence after Trump's usual inane ramblings, where these astronauts can't even bring themselves to dignify what Trump is saying by responding. And so they just sit there and wait for it to end. And look, I'm lucky enough to say that I've sat with two presidents now. It's not exactly something that you just sit quietly and hope passes you by. There was a moment during my interview with President Biden back in 2022 that I've never spoken about publicly, but I got 15 minutes for the interview, which I used all of. And then after the interview, he spoke with me off camera for another 15 minutes.
Drop your thoughts in the comments right now, because I genuinely want to know if you think Trump had any idea how that landed. Here is what makes that silence so significant. These are not shy people. These are not people who are at a loss for words. Astronauts are trained communicators. They go through years of preparation for exactly these kinds of high-pressure interactions. They are used to speaking with heads of state, addressing global audiences, and holding composure under conditions most of us cannot even imagine. For them to collectively decide in real time that the best response to the President of the United States was simply to wait it out. That tells you something profound about the moment we are living in. There is a version of this phone call that should have been a unifying, genuinely uplifting event. A president reaching out to astronauts, pushing the boundaries of human exploration. A moment of national pride that crosses political lines. Space has historically been one of those rare areas where Americans of every background can feel something together. And instead, reportedly, the crew sat in silence while the most powerful person in the country rambled about a hockey legend. That contrast between what this could have been and what it actually was is the real story here. And the world noticed.
And everybody laughed because, like, if you have an audience with the President of the United States, generally you want to use it, which underscores just how unusual it is that these astronauts have an audience with the President, and yet they sit there in silence. And I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that it's not because they don't have something to say, it's not because they don't like speaking, but rather it's probably got just a little bit more to do with the fact of who they're speaking to. And look, Is it a surprise? Like, these are people who have dedicated their entire lives to science. They've worked their asses off. They're brilliant. They're competent. They're quite literally everything Trump is not. You can't fake being smart enough to manage in space the same way Donald Trump has faked everything that he's ever done. He's a con man. He's a fraud, a liar, a cheat.
Now here is where this story shifts from awkward to genuinely alarming. And this is the part that the headlines have almost entirely skipped over. At the very same time, Trump is on the phone congratulating these astronauts and presenting himself as some kind of champion of space exploration. His own budget proposals include a 23% cut to NASA, 23%. The agency responsible for the mission he is currently celebrating on a live call would be gutted under his own fiscal plan. But it does not stop there. According to reports, the same budget framework calls for slashing the EPA budget by half, cutting over $10 billion from housing programs, eliminating billions from clean energy initiatives, cutting clean drinking water funding, gutting youth job training, senior employment programs, and food assistance grants. All of it, reportedly, to raise the defense budget from roughly $875 billion to $1.5 trillion. So the president, who ran on a platform of no new wars, is now, according to multiple sources, presiding over active military engagement in the Middle East, with American soldiers dying, while simultaneously proposing to strip funding from nearly every domestic program that ordinary Americans depend on. And then he picks up the phone and tells astronauts he is proud of them. The disconnect is not just political, it is something else entirely. Do you think the public fully understands what is actually in that budget? Let me know below.
NASA, along with a raft of other cuts, including cutting the EPA budget by half, cutting $10.5 billion for housing, cutting $8.5 billion for K-12 programs, canceling $15 billion for clean energy, $2.5 billion for clean drinking water, eliminating $1.5 billion for youth job training, $3.5 billion from the Labor Department, $395 million for senior employment, $775 million in food assistance grants, and the list goes on and on. And it's all to raise the defense budget from $875 billion to $1.5 trillion. That's right, every domestic program, including NASA.
Now, I want to make sure we give this part the space it deserves, because in the middle of all of this, in the middle of the awkward silence and the geopolitical tension and the budget cuts and everything else, the Artemis 2 crew did something quietly extraordinary. They named things on the moon, not for politics, not for headlines, for humanity. The crew proposed naming a crater on the far side of the moon Integrity. Think about that word choice for a moment, given everything happening on the ground right now. And then, in a moment that reportedly brought people to tears, they named a bright feature near the near-far side boundary after Carol, the wife of one of their crew members who they had lost. A mother, a spouse, someone from their astronaut family who never got to see this mission launch. These people floating in space took a moment to honor a woman named Carol and to put the word integrity permanently on the surface of the moon, while the president was talking about Wayne Gretzky. The contrast writes itself, and it is a reminder that whatever is happening in Washington, whatever is being broken or diminished or divided, there are still people out there doing the actual work. Brilliant, dedicated, emotionally present human beings who represent something real about what this country and this species is capable of.
The first one we'd like to suggest is a named crater in honor of our great spacecraft Integrity. And so if you were to look at Oriental on the far side and then draw a line straight up to Ohm on the far side, relatively in the middle is an unnamed crater, and we would like to suggest it be called Integrity in the future. And the second one, and especially meaningful for this crew, is a number of years ago we started this journey in our close-knit astronaut family, and we lost a loved one. And there's a feature in a really neat place on the moon, and it is on the near side, far side boundary. In fact, it's just on the near side of that boundary, and so at certain times of the moon's transit around Earth, we will be able to see this from Earth. And so we lost a loved one. Her name was Carol, the spouse of Reed, the mother of Katie and Ellie. And if you want to find this one, you look at Glushko, and it's just to the northwest of that, at the same latitude as Ohm, and it's a bright spot on the moon. And we would like to call it Carol, and you spell that C-A-R-R-O-L-L.
So let us bring this all the way back to the title and the question that started all of this. Why did that call leave everyone speechless? Not just the astronauts, but the millions of people who watched the footage afterward. I think the answer is this. Because it was one of those rare, unfiltered moments where the gap between what leadership should look like and what it currently looks like became impossible to ignore. You cannot fake competence in front of people who have literally staked their lives on competence. You cannot perform gravitas in front of people who have earned it. And you cannot expect a crew of scientists and engineers to perform enthusiasm they do not feel just because a camera is on. The silence was honest, and sometimes honest silence is the loudest thing in the room. What is happening right now in this country is bigger than one awkward phone call. It is about what we expect from the people in power, what we are willing to tolerate, and whether we are paying close enough attention to what is actually being said versus what is actually being done. The astronauts named a crater Integrity. That was not an accident either. If this video gave you something to think about, drop a comment below and tell me what stood out to you most. And if you are not subscribed yet, now is a good time, because the stories we are covering are only getting bigger. Next video, we are getting into something that has been quietly building behind closed doors in Washington, and trust me, you are going to want to be here for that one.